It seems every time I hear this story, and it's a true story, I think about the first time I met Paul. It was 1947, and I'd just flown a small plane into the eastern jungles of Bolivia, South America. As I landed and taxied to a parking spot on this little jungle strip, this little fella came running barefoot, all perspiring. I picked him up in my arms, and then I put him in the pilot's seat. He was just all taken with the controls and instruments. And he said, when I grow up, I want to be a missionary pilot. Well, at that time, Paul was only 7 years old, but already he had learned that becoming a missionary involves a personal cost. His parents had been among the first missionaries with New Tribes Mission. Their goal had been to find a hostile tribe called the Ayure, learn their language, and then to teach them the Bible. In the process, Paul's father, his uncle, along with 3 other men, were killed by the Ayure during what had been a peaceful contact. That was back in 1943. Well, when Paul grew up, he did become a missionary pilot, flying missionaries and supplies to remote locations and making emergency medical flights as needed. The story you are about to hear took place on one such trip.
I'd like to start out tonight by referring to a portion in the Bible found in 2 Chronicles chapter 20. The nation of Judah were in trouble. Like many of us are in trouble today, we face enemies, and we all have one enemy, God's enemy. This enemy was too big for Judah, and they did what many of us do. They said, "O our God, wilt thou not judge them? For we have no might against this great company that cometh against us. Neither know we what to do. But our eyes are upon thee." You know, we felt the same way in the circumstances that we found ourselves in back in October of 1985. Tim and Bunny were a young missionary couple working in the southeastern jungles with the Puinave Indians. They had been in this particular area for about 3 years. They had learned the language, and they were there at this particular time with the privilege of being able to share with these people the message of Jesus Christ for the first time in their language. They had built a real foundation, starting in Genesis and building right up through the life of Christ, the death of Christ, the resurrection. And they were having a time of harvest. It was a neat time. I used to like to go there because every time I'd arrive, Tim would share with me some of the new testimonies from these new believers. The Captain Alberto, he said, "Timmy, you know, it's just hard for me to understand how God could have stood by and let his son be killed. You see, you know, you and I wouldn't do that. If someone was going to kill our son, we'd be right out there trying to stop them. And God, he had the ability to do that. But God just turned his back." He says, "Tim, you know, that just shows me how terrible my sin was and how much God loved me." And so you can see why Tim and Bunny wanted to continue. Just about 30 days before this, I had taken Tim and Bunny in and landed around noon, and the Indians had come up to the airplane and they said, "Tim, 35 guerrillas just left here this morning." And I said, "Tim, what do you think? They're getting pretty close." And he says, "Paul, we're having a tremendous time here." He says, "I still have a lot of teaching to go." And his wife, Bunny, said, "Even though it means facing these guerrillas someday, that's all right. We want to stay here." Well, you know, when you have a team like that who are committed to that task, it was a real joy on my part to continue to serve them and to do everything I could to help them. On this particular day, October 4th, Timmy was sick.
You have